What were the biggest challenges you faced in moving forward in your new career, doing this script writing and helping people hone their own pitch and story?
The biggest challenges I faced, I'd already been working with people a lot, but never on such an intimate basis. And so when I would work with entrepreneurs, I'd often work with teams of 8 to 12 people and all different personalities, many of them PhDs or lawyers or are, a lot of education. And probably I had the best gift was learning about my own ego. And when they really irritated me, like, how do I manage that? Hopefully I'm not showing the smoke that's coming out of my ears right now, because sometimes, and after a time, I got to learn that not to take it so personally. What I learned is that probably what I do working with speakers, whether they're entrepreneurs or they're speakers that hit the stage, I'm managing 50% of what I do is managing fear. There's a lot of fear because it's ego-based, right? And so my goal is for whoever hits the stage or stands up in front of an audience of 1 or 1,000 or 10,000, is to cut through that ego and to really step forward and have a North Star that matters to keep you on course. Because whether you're pitching or you're telling a story on the stage, it isn't about you. You're just the messenger.
What does that fear sound like? When you hear somebody say something, how do you know, oh, okay, that's fear talking right now?
Fear usually comes off, it can come off in so many different ways, right? It can be dismissive, it can be rude, it can be abrupt, know-it-all, a lot of know-it-all. And by the way, everything I'm saying, the universe sent me these people to learn because I've suffered from all of this in my career, in my life, right? And so my speakers have taught me a lot about me because I've had these same things. What are you going to tell me? I know all this, right? And so also too, sometimes they think people are confused when they hear that a speechwriter's coming in because they hear speaker coach. And for a lot of people with education, they find speaker coaching trivial and unimportant, and many of them have lectured around the world or have stood up in front of juries. So they find it kind of ridiculous that I would come in and work with them. But once they start to understand I'm really there to work on the foundation, which is story, and that without them opening up to be more transparent and less defensive, because being defensive is really, think of the yin yang, right? Dark and light. When you see somebody who's defensive or brash or harsh in any way, they have a soft center and they're hiding that fragility, and that's what they use to protect themselves. So whenever you see that, never take it personally, because it really isn't about you. And that's what my speakers have taught me over the years, probably one of the most valuable lessons. And so, pretty much the majority of the speakers I've worked with, I've gotten over the finish line to varying degrees. I've had a couple that I couldn't. They just were not emotionally available and they just quit. So that does happen as well. And I push my speakers, so I'm not mean, but I'm firm.
Sure, there's a difference. And did you always have a high emotional IQ, or did that come, because some people, it seems like they're almost born with it, or did it take time where you dealt with these speakers and they showed you things and you showed them, and it's just sort of this simpatico thing?
Yeah, I think I was always somebody who could feel a room. But being able to sit back and feel a room is very different than sitting with that room and reaching beneath the words, going beneath to the meaning beneath the words, and letting those other people know it's okay to have those feelings. I didn't know how to do that. You know, when I opened up my toolbox, my communication toolbox, I would have told you before, I am so capable. But then I looked in the toolbox when it really came time to work with people, and I was like, I just have a screwdriver. Apparently I've been turning it around and using the handle end to hammer things in. So essentially what the speakers brought to me is having to exercise that and to be able to start to hear the feelings that they have beneath the words. So most of the time when we communicate, we talk on the surface, right? But if we really listen to what people are saying, they're saying something deeper. I'm afraid, I'm lonely, I'm sad. But rarely do you hear that in communication, right? And so when I can sit with my speakers, that many of my speakers say to me, oh my gosh, you're like a life coach. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I'm gonna take it as a compliment, right? Because I'm not there to judge, I'm there to hear. And I have to hear, I hear, you know, hours I'll sit with my speakers and I will hear their life stories. And then I'll filter it over time to let the best of their stories rise to the top. Doesn't mean that we won't put in unflattering moments, but I'm there to guide their stories in a way that the audience can really feel and that will really resonate with them.
So what are some of the questions that you began asking someone? Let's suppose I contact you and say, I would like you to help me, you know, I'm a screenwriter or even an actor, filmmaker, and I want to hone my own personal story. And I've already talked about my projects, but when people ask me, what do you do and who are you? How do I hone my, you know, what's our first sort of meeting like?
Just 30 minutes of sitting down and just having a conversation so I can start to, most of the people that come to me, you're very specific in the question, but most of the people that come to me are not. They think they want one thing, but they really want something totally different. So I ask my speakers, I say, you know, do me a favor, write down what you think you want, and here's how many words you get. And then, yeah, and I usually give them like 30% more. And then we carve it back. And what usually the first draft that I see will never look anything like the final draft. And I have people write it out because there's something special that happens when you take time to write it out, especially, and then we work on the conversational tone of it, right? So I can get to know you. That's why so many hours of conversation, and to really hear what's in your heart, because most of us don't know what's in our heart. Part of the problem I see with the speakers that come to me, I've worked with everybody with a high school diploma to, like, you know, I said PhDs and beyond, right? And the minute you have 5 minutes of education, you begin to move in the world with a logic-based mind. And so that's not great for storytelling. That's really kind of awful. So I begin to tell my speakers, I just worked with somebody who made it to the finals of the Rhodes Scholar interviews. And so when he and I sat down and we were talking about it, I said, well, one of the illnesses of education is they reward the mind. And in storytelling, it's the heart. And so you want to look at your vehicle as your heart and the steering wheel as your mind, right, in story. And so I said that wherever we go, we need to be in the heart. The mind just steers us in the direction we need to go. It should help us navigate. It should help us rearrange the speech or the script that is the puzzle. But it's not there because it's a feeling. It's like music. If you don't hit the beats, then the audience won't feel it, right? Essentially.
So when you sit down with someone who's maybe very linear and left brain and logic has guided their whole existence, how are you kind of pulling them out of that for a little bit? Because they are going to tell you their story, maybe they do it in a chronological form, but that doesn't tell you anything about them, maybe? How are you trying to humanize them more?
One of a terrific example of this is I worked with, a few years back, a TEDx talk that I did. I collaborated with Professor Sharis Kubrin out of UCI, and she has a talk called Rap on Trial. And when she came to me, she had all of the touch points of what she wanted to say, very academic, right? This happens, it doesn't matter, again, if you have 5 minutes of education or you have a PhD. And so it comes in a very dry form. There were some interesting points to it, but it wasn't a story and it wasn't even close. And so I used the hero's journey model. And I put it on that and I followed that story arc. And once I did, you could really feel her journey and her struggle through the entire story. And she was worried about it. A lot of academics, it's difficult for them to trust the process because in the academic world, if it isn't dry and sometimes boring, well, then it's not worthy, right? But she was talking to a layman's audience. And so we needed to learn. And that's what I tell my speakers. I'm your audience. I will often refer to we, to myself as we, the audience. If I don't feel it, then it means that you're not feeling it.
So an academic board might rejoice in hearing certain things, but the normal patron at some event may not? I mean, there's not enough of a personal connection to the story?
Let's put it this way. In academia, there's going to be 1 or 2 naysayers that feel like if you're not suffering, then you're not really an academic. It doesn't mean that academics don't want great stories. They do. And they're learning now. They're just starting to make the shift, and they know the importance of it. But they don't know how to get there, and they don't know how to turn their data into story. And that's what they do for a living. And that's also really important for them to know when they talk with journalists. Because that's the journalists in particular, how the information is going to be disseminated. So if you can't tell that story well enough for a journalist not to take it and spin it the way and fill in the blanks, then you're kind of held hostage to how it goes downstream. So I think it's going to be more and more important for the academic to learn to be a better storyteller. But that's essentially how people come to me, and it doesn't matter how much education. I'm just using that extreme because that popped into my mind.
My ride's here, sorry.
Oh, that's awesome.